You know, there really are some things in this life that are so vitally important to our well-being that simply not knowing them can lead to some potentially tragic outcomes. Same thing applies with growing a garden. You know, I can't count the times folks come up to me, they've been growing a garden for their first year, their second year, third year, and they either already given up or they're about to. And the truth is, the problem was they just lacked a few tips of information that they really needed to know. In today's video, I'm going to share with you my 4 most essential pre-season gardening tips for a successful garden. So if you're a new gardener or an aspiring gardener and you're looking to have a good year, maybe you've had a few bad years in the past and you're ready to get it right, this is the video for you. Stick around. Hello backyard vegetable gardeners, hope you're having a great day. Welcome to the Backyard Vegetable Gardening channel, where we talk about growing more of our own food, sharing the joy that's associated with living the gardener's lifestyle. Today is Saturday, February the 14th, Valentine's Day 2026. In today's video, like I said, I'm going to share with you the 4 most essential things that a person ought to know for a successful spring garden. And the first tip is arguably the most important tip for having a successful spring garden. And that is, zones don't matter, frost dates do. Now I know there's some of you that's just clutching your pearls on that one. Guys, I'm not trying to be condescending or nothing like that, but the simple truth is the internet is filled with people about asking, when do I start this in zone this or that? I'm going to kind of help you just so you know. Guys, when you think of zones, think about winter. Zones were established so we can identify which plants will survive how cold it gets in our winter in our particular area. It has nothing to do with when you plant your plants. Now, I grow citrus. I live in zone 7B. I know by my zone that I shouldn't leave those things outside during the winter. That's it. So when winter comes, I take them indoors and I nurse them through the winter, take them back outdoor when it's warm. When it comes to starting a garden, what's real important is knowing your frost dates. Think about it. Spring is coming and we need to know when we can put our plants safely outdoors. Now, zone 7B stretches a long way. It goes from one end of the country to the other end of the country. And I promise you, my last average frost date, which is April 27th, is going to be different than somewhere else far away. Now guys, it just takes a little bit of sense, but let's just, for argument's sake, say I was a brand new gardener and I didn't know anything about my frost dates. How do I learn when my frost dates are? Well, it's easy. There's all kinds of sources on the internet. In fact, this week I've been working on a little project where I've been sourcing data from the NOAA data service. Lots of places. But for the typical gardener, the easiest thing to do is to go to almanac.com. So once you get to almanac.com, what you want to do is you want to hover over that gardening menu and you want to click on frost dates. Once that page loads, where you're going to put your zip code and you're going to click go. When that page refreshes, it's going to have everything you need to know. Your latitude, your longitude. It's going to have your last average frost date, your first average frost date, your growing season, what zone you're in. It's going to have all that stuff. It's a real valuable resource. I use it a lot of times, especially when I'm trying to teach folks about growing a garden. So the very first thing you need to know is your frost dates. Forget about your zones. And the second essential tip for a successful spring garden is how to know when to plant your plants outdoors. Now guys, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the idea of cool season crops and warm season crops. And we know that a lot of crops, especially if they're not the bush type crops, they're going to grow, the indeterminate varieties, they're going to grow until frost kills them off. So we just learned about our frost date. Why is our frost date so important? Well, here's the deal. Here in just a little while, I'm going to be wanting to plant some tomatoes and some peppers and some cucumbers, some squash, and I'm sure many of you guys are too. The number one thing that will kill your warm season crops is frost. So we're going to plant these little plants out in the ground about 2 weeks after that last average frost date. Now there's a caveat to that. if you want to put some protection over those plants, you can get out there much sooner. In fact, several years in a row, we will put a little hoop structure over our raised beds, and we'll put just regular construction plastic over it. We'll fasten it to the ground, and we'll cover it at night, and we'll open it during the day, and we'll protect those plants. And sometimes we can get them out there 2 or 3, sometimes even almost a month earlier. It just depends on the weather forecast. But past few years I've been lazy and I haven't done that, and I've just waited, and we still get a good harvest. Now, unlike tomatoes, your onions can go outside about 4 weeks before your last average frost date. And one way to know all this stuff is just to search the internet, or buy a few books, watch channels like this, or simply read the seed packet. Now, when it comes to all that stuff, unless you're going to do this a lot, you're going to spend a lot of your time gardening, you're not going to remember a lot of this stuff. We've been gardening for several years, and if it wasn't for my little notebook, I'd really have a bad time remembering all this stuff. But I've developed a little spreadsheet and some notebooks, and I look back on them. It's a gardening journal. One of the greatest things that'll help you when it comes to this stuff is to make one. You can watch all the YouTube videos you want, but our attention spans are so short, I promise you, you're not going to remember it, so write it down. Know when you can put these things outdoors and plant them exactly when you're supposed to. Don't get caught up with all the hype, and unless you're going to be willing to do the extra work of covering these spring crops, I really encourage you to not plant them too soon. And tip number 3 in our list of the 4 most essential preseason gardening tips is how to know when to start your seeds. You really do need to know that, unless you're going to be buying your plants from the greenhouse, nursery, big box stores. Nothing wrong with that. If you do, I do that a few times every year. Be out and I'll see something I want, or maybe something I was trying to start didn't do good, and I'll just go pick up some. It's no big deal. But if you do want to start your crops from seed, then you got to know when to do it. So rather than me try to spout out a bunch of rambling here, I made me a little sheet here. And we're going to start off with just some common logic, okay? We talked about our frost date and planning when and ever, okay? We're going to stick with the tomato first, and we're going to use the onions again second, just like we did in the previous segment. All right, here's the deal. Those tomatoes can go out there about 2 weeks after my last average frost date, unless I'm going to cover them. But we're going to do that 2 week after deal. So I know I need to start my seeds about 6 weeks before I can plant them out there. So I've got this wrote down here. If my planting date is around May 11th, and it takes me 6 weeks indoors to grow them things out healthy enough, strong enough to put them outside, then I need to start on March 21st. It's just simple math. You count backwards. Now, back in the days when we had paper calendars, it was pretty easy. You just flip the calendar and all that stuff. Now that we got digital calendars, it's not too awful difficult, but I'm a computer guy and I don't like doing it that way. I've just made me a spreadsheet, and if you're interested in that spreadsheet, I'll put a link right up here. There's a video where I'll show you how to make you one, but it's really that easy. Same deal with these onions. Onions, I can plant out 4 weeks before my last frost date, so that's going to be about March 27th. They need to be in here 8 weeks. That's a long time. So that means if I really want to get them out there as quick as I can, then I should have started them February 3rd, which you didn't do. In fact, that's what these trays are in front of me. I'm going to get some onions, some broccoli, and some celery started today when this video is over with. But the honest truth is, it's easier to let the computer do it for you. It just is, no doubt about it. In fact, we're working on a little project that might make that a lot easier. I am a computer guy. I do know how to write code, and I do know how to work infrastructure. So I don't know. We're playing around with the idea. We'll see what comes. But the third most valuable tip you need to know is to be able to know when to start your seeds early enough to get them outdoors on time, but know the difference in doing them too early, because here's the danger. If you start a bunch of seeds indoors, let's just use tomato plants. We've been talking about tomato plants, even peppers, but tomatoes cucumbers, anything like that, they're the worst. They grow really fast. So if you want to keep these tomato plants indoors longer than those 6 weeks, I'm just telling you, you're going to run out of space. You're going to have to pot them up, and that's all there is to it. So my advice, know when to start those seeds. And the last tip, tip number 4 in our list of 4 most essential things you'll know for a successful spring garden, kind of leaps off of that last point. Remember them tomato plants? Keeping them indoors too long, potting them up. You need to know whether you're going to start in a little old cell like this, or you want to grow in a nursery pot or something like this. Now we've got some square pots up there. I'm just lazy, don't want to get up and have to reshoot this scene here, but the fact of the matter is stepping up is a good thing if you need to do it. It's a bad thing if you don't have the time to do it. Now what I typically do is, based on what I'm growing, I'm going to put it in a big enough pot so I don't have to do that. Now that doesn't mean I don't pot up. I do. I've got some larger nursery pots right up there on the top shelf. In fact, some of them are very large. They're about this tall, about that big around, and that is intended if we have to put peppers or tomatoes or something like that in it, because I have run into circumstances where the weather turned bad about the time I was going to plant and I didn't get to do that. But the thing about stepping up is this. Okay, so you're going to start out in a seed tray, and I'm going to be careful. I'm letting these pre-soak so I can plant my seeds. There's water in here, but these are not too awful small. I mean, they're about 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches, which is significantly larger than a lot of these little trays that you're going to get at the local box store. Them little flimsy type, I think they're about 1 inch by 1 inch deep, inch wide, inch deep. There's nothing wrong with those. There really isn't. The problem is, well, there's 2 problems. Number 1 is they allow you to grow a whole lot of stuff in a small space, and because they are in those little cells, you will probably have to up pot them, no doubt about it. But the second problem is how quick they outgrow those things. Now it does depend on what you're doing, but if you're putting them under lights and you're feeding them like you're supposed to, and you're throwing the fans on them, I'm just telling you, those things, unless it's a slow grower like an herb or something like that, you're really going to run into problems. And really these 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches, that's really the smallest I like to start in. Now these professional growers, they're set up to do things a lot different than you and me do them. And I really advise against using their strategies for what they do in the greenhouse, unless you're bored, unless you got lots of time. But if you're like the average everyday Joe, getting up, going to work, taking care of the wife and kids and all that stuff, you really do need to think about potting them up. So tip number 4 is to go ahead and start your seeds in something a little bit bigger than those 1 inch by 1 inch seed cells. It'll save you a lot of time, and honestly, it'll save you a lot of frustration. And there you have it. Those are the 4 most essential pre-season spring gardening tips everybody needs to know. I sure appreciate you sticking around. Don't forget, if you're interested in learning how to make your own seed starting worksheet, I'll put a link right here in the video. As always, I hope you're having a great day.